This is Diablo 4. It was released by Blizzard Entertainment in 2023. In this video, we will take a close look at planning documents, modular building kits, concept art that shows how they brought their ideas into game assets, behind the scenes insights into their art pipeline, a deep dive into level art, and much, much more. We are starting very strong with the work of Jack Joseph, Principal Environment Artist. So this is the showcase breakdown sheets. So this is from the Vessel of Hatred expansion that was released in 2024. And this is going to give us a very good idea of how they establish the pipeline, how they communicate the main principles to the team, and how it makes the life of everyone much easier when we have the right documentation. So the showcase breakdown sheets were put together in Engine while the asset team members created all the individual pieces. He later put the breakdown sheets together for artists, leads, and directors to ensure that everybody's on the same page and illustrate various principles used in their creation. So let's take a closer look and appreciate how detailed everything is. So this is an example of an area. So you even have the location in the engine. Those would be the indication for the artists who start to work on the project, right? So clearly readable pathing is of great value in general, but even more important in darker zones. And you see how serious that is. And you see also the path remains clear in roughness, albedo, and while fully rendered, even in very dark lighting. So the art is serving the gameplay, as it is more than just an artistic decision. It is to help the player navigate and to make the area, the environments, more readable. So you have more detail on the materials and the build out. So we do not have the time to go big everywhere. So distribution of cool points in a hub and spoke-like manner could help to fill the area out, given the impression of peak interest throughout. So yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover, so you can't fill it everywhere. So the land is dead with little life left to spare. The fallen giants are dominating, highlighted, and forever reaping havoc on the land. Let's look a little bit closer at the main one here. So there are two types of ichor, which is the water, that can be used, non-walkable and walkable. These pools and streams use the walkable variant. We kept the intense foam mask more on the subtle side. So there is so much information on every side. I'm not going to read everything. I'm going to make the board available for everybody to read, but just some excerpts are very important to note. So the decal set is extensive and allows you to tie in the ichor pools and streams with lots of fun drips, splat streaks, and alluvials. So this is like a comprehensive guide on how to, it's basically to standardize the work, if you will, so that everybody working on this specific environment will have that information, right? There is so much to investigate. I don't want to read everything. It's not the goal. The goal is really to understand the intention behind that. So you have here, note, rocks use the giant's look while around the ichor, but use the giant's light look further away. Giant's light is lighter and has more reds in it. So clear explanation on artistic decisions. There are several more. I'm just gonna go very quickly over it because they do illustrate similar principles. And then of course there are different things that are going on in different environments. For instance, this land is very much alive. Its natural features have been mostly spared from the fallen giants as they fell with far less consequence to the environment. There are still hints of the destructive nature of the giants, but it is much less active feeling. So there are notions, there are artistic notions, gameplay notions, narrative design notions, like it's all coming together in this document. So this example makes use of predetermined nav island, nav mesh, right? Navigation. I popped up the head, hips, and small part of the tail to encompass this, but made the connecting bones walkable to stretch the idea across a larger area. So very interesting. You see where you can walk, where you cannot walk. So these bones probably outside of the red bound are are possible to walk. Same thing here. There is so much to gather from that, and for any artist, of course, all of us not working at Blizzard, not working on the next game or something like that, this is extremely valuable too. It's not just a set of directives. It is very smart stuff, very interesting concepts to grasp that you can apply on your portfolio immediately. You do not need to create a whole game to be able to show that you can document your work. Here we have the work of Michael Fabé, who worked on architectural kits. So the first one, Kyrgyzstan. So as part of his work on the environment team, he modeled and sculpted the main modular kits used for the native population of the 5 regions: Skalgen, Dry Steppes, Fractured Peaks, Awazar, Kyrgyzstan, featured in Diablo 4. These are some of the buildings he assembled using the kit he built for Kyrgyzstan. So let's take a closer look. They are fantastic and absolutely gorgeous. And it's always fun to look at assembled buildings from kits. You can see the continuity and the variations at the same time. They look really, really good. And I always like, as much as the game itself looks glorious, I like to see buildings out of context, out of the map. And then in the map, of course, it's also very fun, obviously, but I love it. Next, we have the Fractured Peaks environment. So here we have the first house, which has a typical Diablo look. Even from afar, you could tell this is going in Diablo. So they are a bit more similar looking, of course, outside of geometry, of shape. They are using the same materials, but that's how it should be. This is a much less rich area, so the buildings are less decorated, less variation of materials and such. So here we have Scott Static and more modular kit with complete breakdowns. So first one is the Ancient Ruins Dungeon Kits. So his responsibilities are high, low poly models, baking, UVs, and planning full kits for each dungeon. Let's note that the materials were done by Alice Giancetta. So let's take a look at the high poly sculpts clay render. Then with some materials, same thing, all covered by nice materials, and we have always the scale, very important in renders, and then in the game. Another shot from the game. And we have much more to go over. Another example right here. Another part of the kit. Now with textures. So as you can see, those kits are not small. There's a lot of pieces. Here we have another different, completely different looking kit right here with very nice material work. And here in context in the game. The dungeon pulls assets from all of the above clay renders, engine rendered images in this post. So a mix and match of a lot of things. Same for this shot. Now we have campaign dungeon kits. So he still was responsible for everything he mentioned previously, and he's giving credit to his teammates, which is always nice. And let's take a look at the high poly, low poly. Very intricate pieces right here. Great looking stuff. And here in all its glory with the materials and in context in the game. Very nice environment. The upgrade, the visual upgrade between Diablo 3 and Diablo 4 is just very impressive. Very good to see the clay renders to really appreciate the sculpt. And then with the material, the low poly, all the materials, and in context with the lighting and all the effects. It's a gorgeous game. We have more kits, the dungeon kits. So let's take a look. This is from Vessel of Hatred. That is quite the piece. Here we can see very nice materials. So low poly assets in engine render. The Dark Citadel is pretty large, so this is just showing the basics. All high polys were trim sheets, so no clay render for these guys. Interesting. Then Keep variant dungeon kits. You gotta appreciate those very complex pieces as part of the kit, and the rubbles of bricks and stones and all that stuff. Then you have complete with materials and in-game. Another part of the kit. And its application in the level. Gotta appreciate the lighting work also in these shots. So for this kit, the Temple Dungeon Kit, the material work was by Genesis Prado. So you can see those very intense pieces. And a very interesting kit. Now complete with the material. Other larger assets. And how it looks like in the game. Very creepy. And the last kit from the artist, the Mage Hall's Dungeon Kit. So again, some very complex pieces. And then the kit in clay renders. Then another part of the kit and yet another part of the kit. Let's take a look. Additional assembled elements with their materials. And the look in-game. Very nice modular kits. If you are interested in learning how to apply the techniques that we're covering while analyzing those games, I have created a course in which I show everything step by step. There are no time lapse, nothing is done off screen. I take the time to explain what we do and why we do it. I show best practices. And we are creating a small environment from A to Z. I'm showing every single step of how it's done on a professional production. I can answer any questions you might have on multiple platforms. So if you are interested, there is a link in the description and there's a discount available with the code provided. Now onto the work of Michael Che and some props. So native human props is our first case study. And we can see a bunch of assets grouped together. Beautiful presentation with the scale always. So if you've played the game, obviously you have run into those here and there. And you can see that the level of detail, the attention to detail is very high. Even if some of those are very small props that we see from quite a distance because the camera is fixed. It's very interesting to take the time and to look into those little props, which shows how much love, care, and time went into modeling, texturing, and laying down in the environment. So much variety also. Gotta appreciate the small details. Even from such a distance, we can see those fine details. Now onto the props of the Vessel of Hatred expansion. So there are quite a few and they are very varied. So you can see the artist is naming asset creation, texture, modeling, rigging, animation, and destruction, because he worked on some interactive or interactable assets. I will take a look at that very shortly. So his mandate was quite large. From hard surface to more organic, to some rigging and some destructibles, interactables. There's a lot of things that goes into that. It's not just modeling differently. It's managing the collision, managing the type of materials, the type of collision materials. And of course, there's a lot of testing. A lot of things can go wrong. Some very nice pieces. Now onto a very interesting look into this one. So the Burnt Knights. So Vessel of Hatred campaign. He was in charge of creating a scene for the introduction cutscene. and boss room entrance and cellar arena room. An incredible amount of freedom was given to him by the directors, and he was able to do lots of cool things by himself. That's amazing. Originally, they weren't planning to add rugs, decals, and unique banners for cutscene, but the amazing IGC team and leadership told him he could add it up, so he decided to add more storytelling elements in a day. Kayovashad gameplay space also needed some love, so he created cloth sim banner weapons for knights around town, and added more NPC storytelling elements from entrance to town, and later focused on optimization for multiple console platforms. For boss room entrances, huge thanks to Sean Cation and Michael Manfredi for support. So that's awesome. So you see, the story in AAA development is not always the same. In some cases, you have some freedom. In some cases, you have some room. You have some apparently some budget, but not too much because he did he did a lot in a day. But that's still very, very, very good to hear, honestly. So created IGC version of Brazier, banner decals, assemble existing assets for the platform and snow pass. So that is looking very good. Here we have the original banner metal elements and banner weapons fabric that was done by Michael Fabe. So we can take a look at those. We can see them in context. Here we can see some more. And we can see a GIF right here of how it was animated with the sim cloth. So it looks really fluid, very, very natural. Great work. More. We have character from the story, from the cutscene that was from the cutscenes. And we have more storytelling elements, a little bit here and there. That's just an amazing environment. Now onto the work of Michael Andrula, who is a props and interactives artist, and we are seeing a highly specialized role here. So we start with Skosglen's props. So he was responsible for creating various props for the Skosglen region in Diablo 4. Here are some of the Skosglen militant, wagon, blacksmith prefabs he created. These assets are fully destructible and will break upon being hit in the game. High poly models were created in ZBrush. Josh C. Anderson sculpted the original high models for the wagons and blacksmith kit. Adjustments and updates were made by himself. Low poly models were created in Maya. Textures and materials were made in Substance Painter. And then credits to the rest of the team. So let's look closely. So those are all the little fun stuff that you can break in the game. They can be found everywhere, and they are treated differently than just static basic props. There is actually quite a bit of work, extra work I should say, that goes into this. Now onto the Vessel of Hatred sewer kit. So he created this kit using some existing elements from the Skosglen kit and created a new set of modular sewage and fungus assets. It was really fun tackling something so gross. He especially enjoyed animating the dubbed sewer barnacles. These assets are all fully destructible and will break upon being hit in the game. All animation for these assets were done by the artist himself. So multitasking, that's good to hear. Again, in AAA, not every studio are pigeonholing people in one position. In some cases, they can do more than just one thing, which is very refreshing. So we can see the work. Of course, you see that those assets were reused and then the added organic elements were blended together. And yeah, that part is gross. moving on to Rio Stewart, who also is a props and interactive artist. So here's some work on Kyrgyzstan Interactive's kit, responsible for modeling, texturing, rigging, and animating. Once more. So those artists are a bit more generalist and they are asked to do more than only modeling and or texturing. So let's take a look at those assets. Some are more simple, some are more complex. Now the Goatman Corruption Interactives. So again, modeling, texturing, rigging, and animating. Those are nice assets. They're nasty. They're nasty looking, but very well done. So we are moving on to concept art now, and we're going to look into Hellfort by Samurai Cop. So let's take a look at a very nice piece of concept art here. And let's look at the actual work of concept artists. So it is about iteration. It is about working with the art director to define a style and also functionality, and to inform the 3D team and the material team on how to execute these ideas. So you can see many variations and you can see a very detailed document. This is really, really great. You see 4 different variations, all with something unique. You see the floor design without the rod right here. And here you can see a structure exploration about the arc, and you see basically the clean version, the arch prior to being defiled, and here you see some ideas that ended up being, I guess the main chosen idea was this one, but various ideas were provided. And here you have pillar exploration. So really the goal is to work as part of a large team, and the 3D artists, the material artists, they need visual information as well as text, right? Clear instructions on how it should look. And then they follow those guidelines and then they work their magic. And it ends up looking really cool. Now the Awazar building exploration from the same artist. So you have the small hut variation 1 based on Mike's drawing. So there was another artist involved who did a quick drawing just to give a basic idea of where we're going with this. So it is on stilts above the water. Animal hides and bones line the walls. Then you have variation number 2. This one is on ground instead of stilts, built on and around swamp ruins, sacrificial victims hung up on trees. Variation number 3, and I like to draw your attention here, which are kind of the equivalent of silhouettes for characters. It's just a shape language being being shown here and maybe showing some different possibilities. So bigger buildings with smaller huts surrounding it, has a cathedral vibe, has an altar inside. This is really nice concept art. Next up, the Cathedral of Light. So Kiovashad Red Church sits on the edge of the cliff. This is a wonderful piece of art that gives all the context, the lore, and so much information. And here we have a more technical guideline type of stuff. And you see here we have a 3D version, either done by the artist himself or by someone else. But you see how very true to the concept here it is. So that's very interesting. And then you have the altar, you have the brazier with holy fire, banner, road altar. So you have a lot of information that will help the team create and work on that environment. More concept art from Konstantin Vavilov. Let's look at the Druid's culture kit. So he's saying he worked on how they live, work, with an attempt to find interesting ideas for how they use materials and magic. It was a lot of fun and brain work. So you see that it goes quite deep. It's not just visual information, it's the lore applied into visual ideas, and always with iterations, with options, some callouts for the materials. The work of a concept artist on production is, I see, quite different than from what the students think it is. It's not just drawing pretty pictures. It's all about giving information to the rest of the team. And it is so, we are so fortunate to have access to such great art, first of all, but like the real production documents, the real work being done during the production before the assets are finalized and polished and, released in the game. So this is just so good. And I'm not a concept artist personally, but I do work with concept art. I do work with concept artists, and it's always such a pleasure to study those. And it's literally like you have to spend time to look into it, to sometimes go back and forth with the artist, ask questions on how exactly do they did they plan that these things would be attached together. Some other cases it's made obvious, it's detailed in the document. In some other cases this information is already available from other documents, and there is so much information. And I'm really glad to share those for a game such as Diablo 4, because I know some students and some people who are hopeful to get into the industry, and they work on a top-down project, and they treat it in a way, I wouldn't say disrespectful, but misguided. They think that, oh, those are small assets, we're not going to see them that much anyway. And it's really not the way that these things are handled. Like, of course, it's not the same as first person with a 4K resolution. Like, it's just treated very differently, of course. But you shouldn't think that there is less love and care and time put into those finer details. You see, like, this is really, really detailed. And yes, it is a top-down game that small props won't be seen in super high detail from the camera's perspective. But still, if you are aiming for high quality, well, the small details matters. And yeah, the budget will be, the technology behind how the game is represented and how the view mode is represented, of course that's going to affect the time that the team spends on one material, on one asset, on all of those things. But don't think that we can do this quickly. It's okay. It's not going to be shown that much to the camera. Well, that says more about your attention to details and your care and love, especially if it's on your portfolio and you're trying to break out into the game industry. Like, you should look at these guys who are working on these production, and you should basically put the same level of care. You don't have the same experience, you don't have the same skills. It's perfectly fine. You will get there if you follow their lead and their example. Now, from the same artist, the first vision of Lilith, stained glass window. This is a stained glass window for Nevesk Chapel that was used in-game and in an in-game cinematic. Team made this scene so bloody epic, pun intended, of course. And you see the other members involved. And this is quite early in the game, actually. So probably everybody who played the game can remember. And you see it in context in the game. And probably you didn't pay a whole lot of attention, but let's see how it was actually made. So again, the attention to detail is extremely important, but more than that, we're going to see the process here. So the research, that's the first part of every artist's job. So first vision of Lilith, stained glass window. So they had established kind of the general look. Then the first vision of Lilith, stained glass window. So then, of course, it's change from this first iteration. Then the actual character is changed to an old man. And here's a more polished version. And here we can see in the cutscene. So you can see where it's at in the game, in the cutscene itself. And you can see a close-up. And yes, this is where it gets bloody. And here is the research board of the artist, and you can see so many things going on. So inspiration from the real world, some great pieces, and yes, even some images with watermark. That this is used internally in all productions. If you were wondering, many studios have licenses for some sites and preferred resources for gathering references. But yes, we also do use some images like that. It's for internal purposes. It's not for reselling. It's not for making money or anything like that. So normal version, you see a paint over using some parts of real from references. This is a common practice. Then the blood version, which is, well, quite bloody. And then you have it here. And then you have kind of a rough blockout, concept art blockout, just to establish the shape, the dimension, how it's going to be seen through the camera. Let's take a look now at the drowned ideation for props. And the artist is giving us quite a bit of information, which is extremely interesting. So here is part one of his ideation on the drowned faction props. He tried to imagine some small stories of their interactions with the world, even if they are enemies of this world. He tried to build a deep connection of this faction with their environment, how they use objects, how they change them, what traces they're leaving, and how they use humans in their rituals. So let's take a deeper look. You see some information, the quicker sketch submitted probably to the art directors, and then once some parts are approved, then a more polished version is sent to the team. And this is how everything works. So here we could be spending hours on this simple piece of art. We will not. Instead, I will send the link so that everybody can access this board. Then go to the ArtStation page of the artist and take all your time and read absolutely everything. If you're a concept artist, you have to study the work of these artists. This is how you get into the industry. And there is so much information. Well, if you ask me, this is worth any tuition of any school in North America, at least. Going to school is awesome, is great. There are some good parts. It is also expensive. And in many cases, they will refer you to this kind of material. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have good teachers, they will show you the basics, and then they will show you the way to become a professional, which is study the work of professionals. It's honestly as simple as that. Simple doesn't mean easy, by the way. So let's look at another piece here, which is fantastic, very creative. And again, it's based on real references. As you can see, I heard from some students that they were kind of doubting like how important are references for artists, and how like is it just a work of copying references? It's absolutely not the case. References are the basis, they are the foundation of the creative process, the imagination of artists, but they have to rely on references always. Relying on references doesn't mean copying. For instance, there is a part where the artist is talking about how the wood figures, the wood figurines, are so interesting to him, and just the general feel of wood being carved. And you can feel it in the art that he was inspired by that technique, those techniques, right, which is wood carving. At the same time, I'm not sure if this is intended to be in wood, but regardless, relying on references is an absolute must. It's the starting point. And then you can get creative and then let your imagination run wild. But it has to be founded on real life references with real material. Why? Because it's believable. This is the reality. The reality is if you carve a piece of wood, it will look like this if you carve it this way. Of course, he's coming up with something completely different, but he has to rely on the reality of the folds of the clothes. Like, what's the very specific nature of this material when being carved? Wood as opposed to rock, marble, or whatever, you know? So we can never emphasize too much the importance of references. And then here, the Iron Maiden. So you see also some interesting pieces of art. A quick sketch, functionality, how it will open, what will we find once it's open, because you see some arms trying to get out. And that idea was not kept, but that's life. That's life of any artist in the industry. And you see here, you see the wood, right? You see that the idea of the wood being carved has been kept. And here we have the reliquary, which had as a simple idea here transformed into, see, the shape here is more twisted, which gives a little bit more life. It's a little bit more dynamic. It's more interesting for the character right here to be a little bit more twisted. And this one also, it's not just facing the front, it's slightly turned on the other side, kind of. So this is interesting shape language. Sometimes we can find rich corpse, perhaps more valuable things will fall out of it. So again, referencing functionality, use, and not just a beautiful piece of art. So now onto the drowned ideation for props, part 2. So it's more of the good stuff. So we should be happy. And you see again the iteration process. When you see that more time and more love and attention to detail has been put, this is probably out of several iterations, the one that was pointed as to, okay, this is the one we keep. That's the direction we want to go. And then again, you see, this is the work on production for, well, potentially several years. And we've seen this Iron Maiden in the precedent post. So you see some ideas that are from other posts also, but it's part of a larger bunch of ideas, right? They're bundled ideas. And this is just fantastic to have access to such great work and insight into the process. And here is, well, my personal favorite kind of concept art. It's what is really used in production, given to the 3D team. It's really what you work with. It's basically it's telling a story of how these things are ending up this way, right? So it explains really what happened. It's telling a story. These props are telling a story. Then you have some callouts for wood material reference, the level of decay, of wear and tear, um, so many different aspects. This one, being in the bottom of water, how the seashells are hanging onto it. Like you have some real life references, ideas, but for the game, how it's gonna be laid out. So this is really, really beautiful work, functional work, and it's an absolute must for 3D artists. And here you have another wonderful looking kind of obelisk. And here we have Medusa, and the artist is saying if you have a clear idea, the process of translation from idea sketch to visualization becomes fun and relaxing. Well, absolutely. See, with all the work of sketching up, of probably some back and forth with the art direction, once it's clear, once you have call outs, when like really the direction is crystal clear, well, then the work is easy, right? It is made easier with such thorough preparation. And you have some material references. See that how great it translates from this reference of the material to the actual concept art. You can see on the face, especially in the hair also, but it is just great. And you see combined ideas, and then as always, the magic operates thanks to the skills, the experience of the artist, but it doesn't just happen like that. It is made possible through professional preparation, following a workflow, and then you get these results like every time. Basically, that's the difference between amazingly talented concept artists just sketching stuff for fun, going to school, trying to get a job. Like talent is great, and of course it's needed, but more than talent is needed to get a job in this industry. And it's to work as a organized, methodical, I would say technician, and then art, the artistic skills, the talent can shine even more. And let's take a look at this amazing piece. Also, so see, the idea was very clear that it should be tilted and supported by those beams. Then it's just executed like that. And there's the head variant that we saw also previously in the overgrown version, which is, they took this one, just copied it, and then added some overgrown parts just to communicate to the rest of the team. More concept artwork, this time by Karine Villette. So this is about the Kurast culture kit. So I was responsible for the concepts of the Kurast culture. This was great honor, and I'm thrilled at how it turned out in the game. Well done to the team. Designing the sculptures for Kurast was my favorite part. So let's look into it. Let's start by these fantastic pieces of work. So this is a great look to put everything in context. And here we have some details, and always put in context regarding the dimensions and scale, compared to a human character. And those are the armor racks. You can see that a lot of details went into these concepts. And we see the material that was from their library and that would be used for those assets. And barricades, and always you see the scale in elevation. So that is great for dimension. You can immediately see how those would look like in-game. Cages, and you see hinge mechanism. You see how it's related, how it would work. So functionality is always great part of the concept art. Then you see chairs, and here we see the sculptures, and yeah, they are very elaborate, very detailed. Then we see the Kurast cloth stalls. Very detailed. Always, I love to see elevations. I worked in architecture for a long time, but in concept art, this is what I like. I like to see, in some cases, the plan, so from the top, or elevation from front, back, left, right, and then in perspective, how it's going to look like in the game. And here we see some symbols. We see more that would be used here and there as decoration, as patterns. And again, the elevations here, the various iterations in different styles. And here, the textiles concepts. So this is really in-depth. I really like the appellation of this is a culture kit. This gives you all the keys to work on this culture, on this environment, on these assets. You have elevations here, you get the right scale, and you also have reference to the materials that will be used. So here is the Kurast city. I had the privilege to be responsible for Kurast city design and the Kurast culture look. This took a good amount of time, but seeing it in game, it was well worth it. I'm humbled to be part of such a good team. This was done under Dustin King and Richie Marella's art direction. So giving credit is always welcome, always great. So Trevinsel Light Decor's design sheet. So this is, again, a very complete, methodical document, and we love it. This is what I want to share on this channel, and we are so lucky to have access to that. It's how methodical, how professional these productions are. And this is how it should be when working as part of a team. There is really no way around it with such large teams. See the level of details, the attention from top. I love this one so much. So you have the top view, front, side for all of those iterations. And I mean, it's so clear. As a 3D artist, you really cannot ask for more. You get some clear directives, some very clear information, and then you get this document, which really shows how everything comes together. It's such an amazing document. And working this way, it's making the life of the other team members so much easier. It's still hard work, it's still a lot of work, but it eliminates so many questions, doubts, and that would lead to misunderstanding and then waste of time, because have to go back. That was not what we wanted, or that was not exactly how we wanted it. So you have to understand the importance of these things. Like, never overlook the importance of documentation. And that's true for every role in this industry. This is just glorious, beautiful view. We have more different shots from the same city, different parts. And here we have the Kurast city design. So this is Trevinsel Decor's design callout. So you see a lot of elevations and then in perspective with the material, with the lighting, with scale, because you see the character next to it. It is just glorious. Again, you see all the different angles and you see in perspective. You see the concept doors, various concepts. So this is so complete. Like, you want to be part of a team that has this level of detailed documentation. And you can even have a look at where it will be in the environment. You can see some ideas for trims. Front, side, perspective. Very consistent documentation. So much details. So here we have the work of Sam Gao, and this is a presentation he did at GDC on the art of open world sanctuary. So let's take a closer look. So this is going to be on architecture and foliage. So I will not go over all the details. You will be able to do that by consulting the board. I will do an overview so that you can go and go deeper. So this is an amazing insight into the work of the team. So those are the main principles for architecture. Camera first, structure first, sense of character, sense of decay. So camera first, the readability of the forms. Obviously, it is completely different in isometric view than first or third person. So if you lay the building just flat on the terrain, it's not going to be as interesting as if you set dress it and if you make it blend better in the environment. So having fantastic shapes and form designs is great, but we also want to have believability. Anything manufactured back in the medieval ages has to have a realistic structure behind everything. So that is true for everything. Fantasy, sci-fi, modern day, it has to be believable. Sense of character, evoke emotion with shapes. So of course, different cultures, different types of architecture, different emotion, different personality. Storytelling. From the same culture, you have to be able to tell if it's from a poor district, middle class, or in this case, standard. You don't go to rich in this very case, but they have a bit more means to maintain their buildings than these guys, and then, of course, than these guys. Sense of decay. This is a very important part of Diablo 4's art language, the decay. So you have different states of decay, and they are reflected in the way that the buildings are held together, their material, and their general shape. Nothing is well in the world of sanctuary. So the weathering, physical damage, and infection on top of it. So they had many different strategies to show a sense of decay. Architecture's pipeline. Blockouts, the traditional DCC packages. Prefab, they assemble their packs in the engine. High poly in ZBrush. Low poly in Houdini, that's interesting. Baking mask creation, Substance Designer. Material and texturing, Substance Designer in engine. They produce their materials in Substance Designer and they create their shaders in the engine. So now sculpting in ZBrush. So 95% of the architectural assets were created in ZBrush. We don't enforce a restrictive sculpting style. However, two things to pay attention to are exaggerating the plant changes so it receives light from a fixed camera view, and balancing noise distribution with tiling texture. So this is very interesting to note that 95% of the architectural assets are done in ZBrush. So this is where the high quality comes in because, well, almost everything is sculpted. And also to counterbalance the fact that the camera is far so that we can see a little bit better those details, they have those principles that they adhere to. So those are the tricks that they use so that the light outlines a little bit better those details. Trim sheet, speed and consistency. That is extremely interesting. So we do also use trim sheet tiling texture workflow in some rare situations. When I say rare, this is the only example in the entire game, the Cathedral of Light. So this is the main Diablo 4 game. In the Vessel of Hatred expansion, there were more examples. But in the original version, that is apparently the only trim sheet used. That's very interesting to note. And of course, modularity. So we are also pushing modularity to an extreme level, but always starting off simple. As the example here, we want to break things down into the most minimal and fundamental components first before expanding the kit to hundreds of pieces. So leveraging modular kits allows us to create many variations of buildings. Modular building construction is also conducive for fading. So updates to module are automatically propagated to instances throughout the game. That is, of course, a huge benefit with working with modular kits. You make some changes and then you export in the engine and they are updated everywhere. If you reuse them in different regions, they will be instantly updated. And you gotta appreciate this little visual here, which looks like a little model that you, either in plastic or wood, that you would actually use to build your kits. And here we have a look in Houdini, all the parts that are assembled. So we can see now in ZBrush, and we're about to see a magic trick, the exploded version. So there are tons of assets that are put together. And of course, I believe in the low poly version that is sent in the engine, it is grouped together. But this is how much detail goes into it. You can see with this turntable, those are all the parts that are sculpted, probably reused also. Then we have the town and point of interest. So as an architecture asset artist, you will most likely join a feature team to work on towns and points of interest. These are complicated tasks that involve multiple disciplines to accomplish. So you can see they are using Miro, which is pretty much a standard, a must for every team. So you have the exterior artist, the interactive artist working on props, lighting artists, quest designer, and producer. So those would be the cells or the strike teams. They have different names in different studios. Those would be the smaller teams working together on architecture. So here's a trailer to show the towns and points of interest. Here we have many more slides regarding foliage. I will not cover them one by one. I will let you Go and take your time and read everything, access the artist's art station, and check this out for yourself. There are many very interesting concepts, and it's not because I don't like foliage or anything. They do apply to a lot of other concepts in the game, but I did not want the video to run for 2 hours. Here we can see the work of the artist on the fractured peaks and the alabaster monastery. We can take a closer look with beautiful shots here of the development architectural assembly concept, the alabaster monastery. So we can see the standard version and the version in context with the snow and really well blended in its environment. Same here, we have the bear tribe and we see everything well integrated in the environment. Now with decay, destruction, some buildings from the fractured peak. Here with a lot of snow on them. And here we have this structure being slightly broken, a little bit more. And then we can see a different part here. And here we can see the Cathedral of Light and its surrounding environment. So here we can see the interior of the Cathedral of Light, and the artist was responsible for asset creation and materials. So we have a very beautiful shot here from a very good angle. And here we have a close-up on the altar. Here we see the Kyrgyzstan region. We will see the artist's involvement with structures, more organic assets, and material creation. So first we have the iron look development concept for the asset and the materials. Here we have the Kyrgyzstan boneyard. Lots of organic shapes, completely different type of assets. Here we have the Kyrgyzstan ruins. So this is a presentation from Marine Fatima, and it is the Art of Open World Sanctuary level art. So they discuss the environment art workflow and style for creating the open world spaces of Diablo 4, including assets, foliage, materials, and level art. Our pipeline was built through the efforts of our whole Diablo 4 team, and we were honored to be able to present on behalf of them. I focused primarily on the level art section and presented our step-by-step process on taking spaces from blockout to shippable polished quality, using the town of Menestad from Diablo 4 as an example. So let's get started. What is exterior art? So this is an overview of the sub-disciplines of exterior art. So you got architecture, foliage, materials, and level art. What is level art? That is the question that I hear all the time. Full disclosure, I'm a level artist. I've been working in this role for a few years now. In my experience, I've been a level designer, an environment artist, and a level artist. And depending on the game that you work on, level art will have somehow a different definition or different meaning, but here is a very good definition. So you have the asset artist who is doing trees, rocks, buildings, smaller tree, bigger rock, snow. And then this is sent to the level artist. Talking to other departments, quest design, lighting, VFX, narrative. The city is often attacked by the nearby vampire den. Interactives and prop art, tech art, dungeon art, level design. We need a path to the vampire den dungeon to the northeast and to the waypoint to the south. All of those information are directed to the level artist. The level artist is basically the owner of the level or the environment, and we are helping all the department come together. So artistic eye, storytelling, problem solving, technical performance skills. The development process, how to take a scene from blockout to polish. So blockouts, in some cases, you have the landscape, you have some elements already in place. You have some part of structures. You have some structures in place. But there is quite a bit of work until it looks like that. The left side depicts areas from Diablo 4 at blockout quality, and the right side shows the same areas but at shippable. Major phases of development. The blockout, presentable for director's review, internal testing, shippable, it's getting there, and with polish, which is the highest level of quality. And this is a very good breakdown of the main phases of development of level art using a particular area of Menestad as an example. The level art development process. Blockout, level design. You have the wilderness and the points of interest. There are two main types of spaces in the open world, points of interest and wilderness. Basically, they will be between the points of interest, right? Level art development. Blockout, readability. The red line is the boundary of the nav mesh. This is a discussion of making sure the edges of our nav mesh are readable to the player. Who likes invisible walls? I believe nobody. But this is what we are handed in some cases, and it's just like, well, that's the boundary of the level. And it's up to the level artist to make it work, make it make sense artistically, visually, and gameplay wise for the player to not be frustrated. Because, of course, you should be able to go there. But then, okay, we could debate, this is just high grass, maybe I could slash, I could go, but still, most players would understand and they would not argue that, yeah, okay, I shouldn't be able to go there. So attention to road treatment. So this is a road, right? It works fine. But in this version, you understand it much more clearly. It is much more readable. So at this stage, we lock in the terrain material palette, work on the transition between roads and wilderness, add decals, etc. So you see also the water banks, the river banks here, they are much more natural instead of what we have here. We can clearly understand where the roads are going, where it should go. So at this phase, one of the things we do is pay more attention to the transitions between spaces, such as the terrain materials here. So you see you have a much better blending, much more progressive blending instead of harder cut here, right? So this is the type of work that is done at this stage of production. Polish. Feedback. Hollow for logging camp polish. Add set dressing to improve logging camp storytelling. So this is an example of before and after. So you see it's kind of empty, and here by adding a little bit, not much, but just by adding a little bit, it makes a bit more sense. It is a bit more believable. Nav mesh cleanup and improve readability. Example of real polish feedback during the development of this area and before and after. So with how the assets were laid out, it was a little bit more confusing for the player, as here it's much more clear and much less confusing. This is a great one. So at the polish phase, main road polish, add decals to improve T-junction. So this is a T-junction, and everybody can tell it's a T-junction, but it's visually not that clear. Whereas here, there is no debate. There is no questions. This looks like a real T-junction in the wilderness. So that acts as a recap of the phases. So talking about blockout, ask questions and understand the space. Talk to partner teams and developers. Validate big shapes and beats. Playtest the space. Presentable. Major elements are art blockout representative. Identify needs that are not currently satisfied. Replace assets with art assets. So block out with art assets. Continue to respect design's goals. Shippable. Adding small details and shapes. Final terrain painting pass plus biome pass. Final checks for clean nav mesh gameplay. Final checks for performance. Polish. Opportunity to +1 the quality of the game. Playtesting and finding polish items and bugs. Further refine and add details to compositions. Enhance and add small stories and themes. And here you have the team that worked on the exterior art. So congrats to all the team. The game is gorgeous, wonderful, and the open world it's really a success. Like turning Diablo 4 into a more open world game really went smoothly thanks to the team. So this is an amazing presentation, and this is one of the best example and explanation of what level art is. And I know there is a lot of confusion from people outside the industry, and even in some cases so many studios have this position and the work is actually so different. And even at the same studio, a level artist working on different games, their role can be extremely different. So it is a very difficult position to explain, summarize. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but this was very brilliantly explained in its essence, at the very least on this specific game, of course, but I think it does give very great insights into the role, into what level art is, and why it is so important. This is the conclusion on the breakdowns of Diablo 4. Now there is much more work on this board for you to discover, because I will make it available very soon. So if you have not done so already, please leave a like, subscribe. You can hype the video also, and stay tuned for many more breakdowns from great games. Check out the link for the course on how to become a level or environment artist, and see you in the next video.